Welcome back to today's episode of Unapologetic Living. I am excited to welcome John Hoppy Hopkins. Did you go by Hoppy?
People call me Hoppy. They always that's been my nickname my whole life, but I'm John Hopkins on paper.
Okay, so welcome, John. John is a life and death guide. You're helping others discover life's purpose through mortality and awareness, correct? Is that what I have
That's
read?
right. Yes,
And you
exactly.
also have a new project called Dying to Live with Purpose.
Yes, correct.
So I was reading last night a little bit on your Substack and some of your newsletters, and I love what you're doing. I love that you have, I can't remember, did you sell everything or rent your home out
Yes.
and are traveling the world for a year with your family? And I just think it's fantastic because I'm not a huge fan of school in a building for kids ever. There's like to me, there's almost zero reason to have that. I never thought a God would put me here to be in a building for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Agree.
can you like what brought you here? What's the backstory?
Okay. Sure. Well, thank you firstly for having me on your show. Um, I spent about 15, 20 years working in entertainment. From a young age, I always wanted to be a film director. I always wanted to make movies. And when I finished university, I started working in the film industry and I became a film director and ended up directing TV commercials. And I made a feature film which came out in 2017. And it was around that time, excuse me, that I saw a drone display in the night sky at the Korean Winter Olympics. And that inspired me to set up a company called Celestial, which is a drone display company. And we told stories in the night sky using hundreds of drones as little points of light that you could animate. And I was had an amazing roller coaster journey with this technology company. And about 3 years ago, I started to experience some quite heavy crises at work. And what happened was because I built this company and I've had so much of my energy poured into it, when the company started to suffer, I started to suffer. And actually, what happened is I started to have these panic attacks and it resurfaced these feelings of dying and that came from near death experiences I've had in my life. And for several weeks, I felt like I was dying, basically. And I was listening to one of my favorite philosophers in the evenings before going to bed to try and calm my nerves just so I could sleep through the night. And there's a man called Ram Dass who's no longer with us, but you may have heard his name. And yeah, he I noticed he talked in a lot of his podcasts about the fact that sitting with dying people had been the highest work he'd ever done. And I was like, gosh, I feel like I'm dying at the moment, and maybe I'm supposed to work with death. Was the question that popped into my head, and that was when my purpose exploded towards me, and it was like a charging rhino, and it was death, and I resisted it with every fiber of my body, and it was too powerful, and I let it wash over me, and I had this amazing visceral experience of feeling in physically like my purpose deepening, and it was both exciting and terrifying in equal measure all at once. It was very powerful. And so from there, I realized, well, if I'm going to work with death, maybe I need to sit with dying people, like how Ram Dass had described. So I then trained as an end of life guide, specifically a training called to become a soul midwife, which is a type of end of life guide. And so I started this a very unexpected journey into mortality, which I never in a million years thought I would do. I always thought I'd be a movie director. And as I started to go down this journey into mortality, I started to spot that there was a correlation between um, mortality and purpose. So I realized that all the fears that create limiting beliefs for us in the West and I'll only talk about the West because that's really only the area I'm familiar with. But all of these limiting beliefs that create blockages in our lives can all be traced back. They're all little fears that whisper in your ear, don't do this, or don't try this, or, if you do this, you'll get in trouble, or whatever it is. All these little voices, they're all little types of fears. And I realized from doing this work with death that all fears can be traced back to the fear of death. It's like the grandmother fear that sits under all other fears. And I thought this was kind of astonishing. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized that, no one in the West wants to talk about death. It's an inconvenient truth. Um, we're not educated about it at school. There's no education throughout life, really. Death usually happens in hospitals these days. Um, so we're separate from it as a conversation. And as a result of not talking about it, and by the way, it's the only thing in life that's guaranteed. And yet it's the one thing no one wants to talk about, right? So
Yeah.
I saw this realization that, gosh, all our fears come from this one existential fear, and we spend billions of dollars on mental health care and trying to solve anxiety and all this stuff, and yet it's coming from there, but no one wants to do anything about that. So I wrote a book explaining this link between um, our fears and the opposite end of that spectrum, which is potential and purpose. Because the moment you start to understand where your fears actually come from, which is the thorny conversation around mortality, then you are having this conversation, and by reintroducing the topic of mortality, your fears can start to subside. They get replaced by courage. And as the courage comes in, you start to try new things. You start to take some risks. You start to discover things that you're capable of that you never realized you could do. And before you know it, you're on this path towards deeper potential, alignment, and purpose in life. So, this is the journey I've been on the last 3 years. And right now, I'm traveling with my family because we had an epiphany about a year ago that we've always dreamt about traveling the world as a family. But we had a million little voices whispering on our ear telling us why that was never going to be possible, right? And so we convinced ourselves that that wasn't possible. And we had an epiphany a year ago. We saw how we can make it happen. It was one of the scariest things we've ever done, if not the scariest. We sold our house. We sold all our possessions because we wanted to be as light as possible. And we only took one carry-on bag each onto the plane, so no check-in luggage. And we're about 7 months at the moment traveling around the world with three children, and it's been an incredible experience.
Yeah, from what I can tell, it looks incredible. It looks like it's been incredible. I was telling you, I know before we started recording that my favorite movie is Captain Fantastic, and although not the same, they were removed from, society and cultivating really deep connections with one another and the earth. And I just think what you're doing is amazing. And I know that I just kind of want to back up for a second. You say fear of death is the ultimate grandmother fear. Now, would you say that that is the fear of death solely in losing the physical body?
Yes, good question. Uh, um, so yes, I think it's the sort of ego. I think it's a sort of mixture of the ego and the physical body. So the ego is the thing that's baked into our DNA, that is our like survival mechanism. I mean, obviously we all know that the ego serves other purposes as well. But when it boils down to it, the ego is the part inside you that does not want you to die, you know? So yeah, you could argue that it's partly that the ego will die if the physical body dies. So you could kind of have a debate there about which is it that you're most scared of. But it's sort of both of them at the same time, I think.
Yeah, because I think about anytime you're making a big life change, there isn't a part of your identity, right, that has to die in order to do that too. So it's like you are almost dying over and over and over again throughout a lifetime.
That's correct. Yeah. Yes. And I think we all, whether we're aware of it or not, go through life and we experience lots of mini deaths. I mean, some of us might experience death firsthand if a loved one or a friend dies, or we might witness a pet dying, for example. But on a kind of psychological level, we experience lots of little deaths as we evolve throughout our lifetime, right? And I think the better we get at recognizing that parts of us are dying away to allow something new to be born, the better you get to practice the ultimate death, which is, at the end of your life or whenever that death happens to you, the final death. This is something that Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, talked a lot about, certainly in the second half of his career. And he believes that certainly, like when you reach midlife, the second part of your life should be dedicated to learning how to die well. And that includes recognizing all the mini deaths that you experience during your life.
So, okay, so when you talk about the fear of death, again, being the grandmother of all fears, um, and then, I'm just thinking, how does that, how does that, I know you said you've sat with a lot of people as they are beginning to transition all the way through the
Yes.
process, then are reborn into, I mean, to me, it's also a rebirth, sort of. I don't know
Well,
what
I've
your
sat
spiritual
with dying.
beliefs are, but
Yeah, I've sat with people who are dying. So I volunteered for a couple of years and sat in hospital just to be a sort of loving presence for people who didn't have anyone else to be
Mhm.
with them in hospital, which by the way is quite a sad truth that a lot of people go to hospital to die,
And they're alone.
and there's a lot of loneliness. Yeah, there's a lot of times that people are there, and there's only so many times a loved one can visit in a hospital or friends can visit. So this is what's happened in our system now. People basically just sort of go to hospital and often are there alone in those final moments. And really, what everyone wants to be is home and around loved ones, but that is often not very convenient for people. You know. So I've experienced that, and I've experienced my own sort of mini deaths, and I've actually had near death experiences. Um, so
Oh,
I
you
feel
have
like I'm
yourself.
yes, yeah, yeah,
Now, when you say you've had near-death experiences, I had another guy on the show who had a near-death experience. He got the dengue fever, and became really, really sick. He was in, oh my goodness, what was he in? I forgot. But he started having this overwhelming, like these crazy dreams, uh, to be to start producing art. He'd
right,
never
yeah,
been an artist. I found him at an art show and I was like, oh my gosh, this is just really unique. These were really unique pieces. And and so, but he remembers like leaving his body,
yeah,
looking down at the room and getting a very clear message. It was not time for him
yes,
to leave, or maybe he was given the choice. I don't think so, actually. And then I have another woman that I saw. She was a kind of a spiritual, holistic counselor uh, back in, I saw her for years, but she also had a near-death experience when she was 40, and same situation. She had, a very clear message was above her body.
Yes.
and that it was not her time to go. She was to come back and help counsel people. And now she looked at life through a very different lens than your traditional therapist. And
Mm.
that's one of the reasons I found her. And I have a big, deep belief in reincarnation. There's something about that that resonates for me. I was raised Methodist. I there was something, but anyway, and I found that, in my 20s, and I don't, but I guess when I think about little fears that I have, how do I connect them? Like, and I'm, because I know we all have them, but how do I connect that with like the true fear of death?
Yeah, good question. The fear of death for most of us sits dormant, right down below all the other fears that we kind of deal with on a sort of daily, weekly basis. And the fear of death only really shows itself if there is an actual incident or moment where your life is maybe threatened. And we live now in a world and society where our lives, unless you're completely unfortunate and living somewhere like in the Ukraine or Russia right now, and there's a war going on and there are actually people dying. But for most people, we're not confronted with life-threatening situations very often, if at all. So we're dealing a lot with the superficial fears, but the grandmother fear sits under that. And a lot of people think, oh well, I'm not scared of death because they never have to deal with that fear really like showing itself in its true glory. Um, and for that reason, I think people dismiss it. But if you, from an evolutionary point of view, you can track every modern fear, such as like the fear of public speaking, the fear of rejection, fear of intimacy, fear of love, and you kind of like trace it, you do detective work, it always boils down to something existential. So, for example, fear of rejection or fear of failure at work
Hmm.
can be boiled back down through our evolution to when, if you did something wrong in the tribe and you were exiled from the tribe, exile meant death, right?
Hmm.
But so we still have the wiring, the ancient wiring active in us from when our lives were threatened regularly, hundreds of thousands of years ago, when we really truly had to survive to stay alive.
Hmm.
But we've now evolved to a point where we're not battling saber-toothed tigers anymore, and being presented with life-threatening situations the way we used to survive. But now we find ourselves living in a time where we've got different problems, but the same wiring is still there. Like the same operating system is driving our choices. And we are walking around as individuals and societies without realizing it, making the majority of our decisions based out of fear. And as we all know, when you make a decision based out of fear, it tends to be a bad decision, right?
Yeah. And so when I hear that, and um, I think about, okay, if you're making a decision out of fear, there's no faith there.
Yes.
And that's or to me again, trusting in a higher divine source of energy, whatever you want to call it. Um, and then you're also, and this is the one I heard at Al-Anon one time, you're edging God out, right? And I think it can be a difficult, like to make the decision to sell all your belongings and move is huge, right? People stay stuck in these places where they can't
Yeah.
make the decision, right? So as a body worker, well, a couple things come up. The psoas muscle connects the spine to the legs. It's the only muscle that connects the spine to the legs. You got muscles in your glutes, but there's only one muscle that is actually attaching your spine to your legs. And in through the yogic philosophy, that muscle would be considered the seat of the soul.
Mm.
It's also the same muscle that Peter Levine fatigues to create the tremor, which would be your fight or flight response after you've gone through a situation. You've an animal in the wild, if chased by, let's say, a rabbit is chased by a cheetah, after the scenario's over, the rabbit would go and lay down in the dirt and just tremor to release all of that
Yes.
adrenaline and
Yeah.
such. And
Yes.
I believe, you know, that we would have done that as humans at one point. We no longer do. And so all this tension and trauma gets stored, and oftentimes it's in this muscle around the psoas because it's our way to either move forward, go backward, right? And so we become paralyzed, and you've got hip pain and chronic back pain. And, so you were talking about too, how you were having these panic attacks at work. And, I also very strongly believe that the body, what, uh, what's going on emotionally and spiritually absolutely will manifest in the physical body somehow, right? To
Yeah.
get your attention as a wake up call. And I wonder, and this is just, I sometimes think maybe we start to get the taps sooner. Did you feel like you were getting these taps sooner
Yes.
than when you actually finally decided to take action? You had to have this sort of catalyst moment, come to Jesus moment, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
in order to finally say, okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the message had been there for quite a long time because I was feeling more and more physically sick at work. I built a business which on the one hand I was very proud of and had a lot of success. But then over time I started to feel like the purpose of the work was no longer serving me, and I started to feel stuck in something I built. And so it was almost like a trap of my own making. And I think a lot of people probably can relate to that with, you know, taking a job out of necessity rather than out of your sort of sole purpose or your soul
Mhm.
alignment. A lot of people at jobs where deep down they feel like it's not serving me this. It's kind of making me feel sick on a very deep level, but I don't see any way out of it. I'm paying my bills. I've got a mortgage. You know, I've got X, Y, and Z that are all being paid for. So I've kind of, on one level, I've got the life that society has told me I need to get.
Mhm.
But on a deep sort of spiritual level, something not right there, and I'm not feeling aligned. But I don't have the tools or the confidence or the courage or the clarity to do anything about it. So I'm therefore stuck and trapped. And I think a lot of people go through life like that. And I learned a statistic the other day, which I thought was really shocking, which is something like about two-thirds of people in the West die with at least one major life regret. And from my point of view, when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, it was just another really obvious truth of this problem we have, which is we don't talk about the one thing in life that is guaranteed. And because we don't talk about mortality and death, we are creating these traps and prisons for ourselves in life to the point where you might get to the end of your life and you might have led a long life. But deep down, you're like, as you lie on your deathbed, you're like, oh, I wish I'd done that or had the bravery to do this. And nobody deserves to die with a major life regret. I think all regrets can be resolved. And this is something I've learned from being an end of life guide. They can be resolved. But I feel like I'm here now and my life's work is to help bring this conversation into the open, make it accessible in order so that people can step more quickly into purpose and alignment and avoid having any regrets when they lie on their deathbed. So I've actually, one of the things I've done is I've got on my Substack newsletter, I've got lots of tools and tips and tricks and essays all about this and guidance of how to step out of anxiety and sleep better and find deeper purpose. But one of the tools I've just designed is an AI chatbot that will ask you 10 questions about your life, and then it will reverse engineer your life from how you want to feel at the end of your life, so peaceful and complete and fulfilled. And it
Hmm.
will track it all the way back to where you are today. And it will identify the major life regrets that you are headed towards and give you suggestions about how you can course correct now so that you can step into deeper alignment.
I love that. I was actually going to ask, I know because you said, what did you say? Carl Jung said that you need to prepare well for the last
Yes.
path. I- Okay, so that when you so I drive Lyft and Uber sometimes. It's been a little bit, but I've been driving Lyft and Uber for the past 10 year 10 years. I'm gonna say, yeah, 20, maybe 2000, no, 2000, I forget, it doesn't, 10 or 11 years.
Yeah.
And I can attest 100% to the people in America right now who get into my car and are going to a job that because when you get in my car, you're not getting just a regular old car ride, honestly, because what I want is for people to live their soul's purpose. My kids would tell you they don't understand why I didn't, teach with my master's degree in the public school system here because it would have sucked my soul out. That's why. I knew I couldn't do it. So I homeschooled them. I waited tables. I brought an extra kid in. I did all the things I wanted to offer my kids the life that I really wanted them to have, which was they were home most of the time. Uh, well, they were home. They weren't home most of the time. They were home in their youthful years. So my son never went to a school until he was 10. And then my daughter was 7. And then I enrolled her in a Waldorf school. And then I found um, a private school for my son here. And it wasn't for the education. It was I knew they were going to be active in this school. He was getting organic lunch. He got plenty of physical time. Well, I wouldn't say he got as much time outside as I would have liked, but compared to what our public school system offers, he was going outside every day. He was getting physical activity every single day, physical education every single day, whereas that is not taking place in a public school in our county.
Yeah.
Um, and and um and so I did things and they still don't necessarily get it. I am a Jill of many trades. I have this podcast. I wrote a book. I but even putting that book out there was a little bit scary, right?
Yeah.
But if I didn't write it, then that would be, I always wanted to be an author. I still have another book to write and it will get done. But, putting it out there was a little bit uncomfortable. But
Yes.
when I think about again, but I still like, okay, so had I not done that, I still want to connect like where the fear of death comes in. I'm still trying to like weave it all together. Uh, but and so in the car when I have conversations with different people who get in and out, so many people are going to a job just for the paycheck, as you say, and they don't feel like they're doing life fulfilling work. And I do wonder because I know we also shared our ages earlier, if sometimes we can't actually access that purpose until we get closer to midlife. You get into this space where like you have to get to a place where whatever there's no fucks left to give. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's that, what's that book? It's like the
Yeah.
art of giving, I forget, but like you, I don't know if in your earlier years or in our younger years, we actually, unless you're a really old soul, have that. I guess some do. Think about
Yeah.
these like motocross guys who get on a bike they know they could die every single, when I got on that, when I took a mountain biking lesson, like I was afraid for sure. And I realized like I was exhausted after like 2.5 hours of a lesson because all I was doing was trying to stay alive. But,
Yeah.
there I could say, okay, well, the reason that I don't want to get on a mountain bike and go downhill in the Rocky Mountains is because I actually really have a fear of, like, this could cause my death.
Yes.
Because that's real, like that one you can wrap your head around. That could cause death.
Yeah.
But then when you think about like starting a business or writing a book or putting your artwork out there, it seems like more of it is an ego death.
Yes. Other than, you could argue something I'm starting to look into a little bit more about the prevalence of, let's say, male suicides in the West,
Hmm.
and where do those all come from? You know, so when internally you've lost connection, you've lost alignment to such a degree, and I'm talking about sort of people in midlife, and certainly over in the UK, there's a lot of men in midlife who commit suicide. It's huge,
I
you
think
know,
that's
and
I think that's true here too.
yeah, and so I think I haven't quite made the connection yet. I haven't spent enough time on it, but there's a correlation here where you know people who are so far out of alignment internally with their soul that they feel you know the only option for them is to tap out physically now. So being out of alignment with your purpose and what your soul really needs will eventually make you physically sick. It'll make you mentally sick and it'll make you physically sick. And again, there's more and more research coming out now, scientific medical research about the links between mental health and cancers. And it totally makes sense. I think personally, had I not had my fortunate epiphany, which was both exciting and terrifying, where I realized I was supposed to work with death, I may well have developed a cancer at that point in my life because I was mentally at dis-ease and it was making me feel physically sick. And this was going on for weeks and weeks. And the more it was going on, the more worried I was becoming that it was going to result in some sort of chronic illness in
Hmm.
me and maybe even my own death. That's how it was starting to feel.
Did you read is it Gabor Mate's book When the Body Says No? Have you read that book?
No, but I've heard about that.
Oh, it's
No, I
really
haven't.
good. I haven't read it in its entirety. I got it because my significant other, he actually has MS, multiple sclerosis, and in chapter 2, they really dive into that. But he does talk about, how the body and the mind, body, spirit are deeply connected, and your body will tell you no if you're paying attention and aware. And I think that because we're so distracted and we're busy, 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 and we're trying to produce and produce and produce, and then we numb out with whatever alcohol, drugs,
Mm,
TV, Netflix, I and or even the number of people who are on SSRIs and antidepressants, I think is alarming. And when I think, and
yes,
I don't know how many men
yes,
those, I don't know how many men that is who are on such drugs. But I do think that we are somewhat of a less resilient society because I do believe that there is, aside from not being taught about death, but recognizing and understanding the way our body feels, the sensations, what comes up when we are experiencing different emotions and being able to tune in. Anxiety feels here. When I'm sad, I feel this. This is what takes place in my body. And when you really fully understand your bodily sensations, you might notice that you might become more aware of what's going on sooner than many do. But we're so distracted. And I'm going to tell you, when you have a bunch of
Yes.
kids sitting in a classroom and a teacher is telling a child that they can't go to the bathroom and honor the bodily sensation, they are being told from very early on, don't listen to your body, which to me is unfortunate. So I think about the men that you're
Yeah.
talking about, and I think about the SSRIs, and I think about the ADD medication and how ADD medication often leads to the antidepressants. And then you have, people who don't even, that think life is just supposed to feel good all the time. And really, we should be able to ride the wave and be able to embrace it all, embody all of it. And so then you hit midlife. I don't know, but I do. So this was what you had this epiphany. How old? I'm just curious because I do know that that is a real thing. And I do think people are I think it's by design that people are not living in alignment with their purpose. Because if
Mm.
everybody was living in alignment with their purpose, we wouldn't
Yeah.
have this crazy, crazy shit going on in the world, right? Because if you're living in alignment with your purpose, to me, that's
Yeah.
your purpose, your
Yeah.
highest purpose is, you know, again, from God, good orderly direction, it would be in the highest of all highs. So we wouldn't have this madness on earth. But
Yeah.
I
I
do want to,
agree.
I
I
do
like
want
to
to,
think I had my midlife breakthrough
because
rather
I
than mid.
also read that your father passed, right? Did I read that?
Yes,
He
that's right.
did
Yeah.
pass.
Y- Yeah, he died in my arms about 4 years ago, which was a very powerful experience. And it was before I started training as an end of life guide. But it was a big moment for me because for several years I've been playing around with the idea of the fear of death being one of the major issues that humanity faces without even realizing that it's a problem. And so I've been thinking about this for several years, and through the process of sort of studying this, I started to become more and more at peace with my own mortality, to the point where when dad died in my arms and I pumped his chest for about 45 minutes, he had a heart attack. He was very weak and he had Parkinson's. Um, I was really glad to be there and to be able to be present and perform the CPR. I was there with my mother. She wouldn't have had the physical strength to pump his chest for 40 minutes. So I was grateful for that, but I was also just sort of grateful to be present, to witness, the passing of my father in front of my face, and for that, deep experience, because it was incredibly sad, but I also felt like super grateful to be there, if that makes sense. And I learned so much from it. And I actually feel my dad's presence and energy every day now. And it's a really big, bright, shining light in the work I'm doing now.
Hmm. So, okay, so you said you hadn't started your soul midwife uh course or program or certification until after his passing.
No.
Okay.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. But you had been called to death prior to.
I've been called to sort of explore this idea of
Mhm.
that why are we so scared of death? And I don't know where it came from, but for several years it was like rattling around in my head, and I was thinking about it a lot. And I was writing a movie at the time where I was exploring it as a theme in the movie.
Mhm.
And that gave me, I wrote that film for about 4 years, and just gave me a lot of space and time to reflect on this. I then did a um, plant medicine ceremony in 2018, I believe it
Mhm.
was,
Ayahuasca?
2017, 2018. And I had a very, yes, I had a very profound experience taking that question into that ceremony. So I went in there with this question. We were told, prepare a question or something you'd like to solve inside yourself as part of this healing ceremony. And I was like, right, I'm going to ask the question of whether we should be scared of death or not. And just as, at the peak of the ceremony, I felt like the right time was to ask the question. And I asked the question, and I had this extraordinary experience as a response. And what happened was, the moment I said, should we be scared of death? I suddenly, the blackness of the night where I was turned into a kind of orange glow. And I could feel my body kind of curling up. I was lying on the ground, and I went into a kind of fetus position. And I suddenly realized I felt like I was back in a womb, and I
Mm.
felt like I was a little baby in a womb. And then it hit me that this wasn't just a vision I was having. I was having a memory of being back inside my mother's womb.
Mm. Mhm.
And the overarching feeling of being inside my mother's womb was one of safety, warmth, and love.
Mm.
And I realized, being back in that memory, that this is where I come from, and this place where I come from, fear doesn't exist, because it's
Mm.
only when you're born into the world
Mhm.
and you start to grow over time that uh, uh, fears enter your consciousness, and fears are man-made. So the place where we come from and the place where we return, fear does not exist. And that was the response I got from the universe that night to my question, should we be scared of death? And I often, anytime I feel anxious or fearful, I actually use that memory as a meditation. And I invite anybody else to do the same. If you're feeling anxious or fearful, take 5, 10 minutes and imagine yourself back in your mother's womb, a
Mm.
place of safety, warmth, and pure love.
Mhm. I've heard memories of being, in your mother's womb resurface for others. I haven't spoken to anybody else who necessarily has had that experience. So would you say, okay, so if you had um, if you had a spiritual belief, what would it be? That's one question I have for you, but just so I don't forget, I had a friend, so the same woman that I was talking to, so right before, in 2017, I had a friend who took her life. She took her life, in August of 2017, but leading up to, it's just so interesting, leading up to her death, um, I had this hairdresser who kept giving me these books on death and the afterlife. And the same therapist was also giving me books. I read quite a few books by Brian Weiss. Have you read his work, Many Lives, Many Masters? And then he talks about, he would talk,
No, I haven't.
he writes about uh, what happens when you take your life, a suicide. And it was, um, And then the woman that I was seeing for therapy too, she said, she had told Tammy because Tammy had been talking about taking her life for a while. So it was not news. It wasn't really surprising either when she did take her life. And it was interesting. She and I had applied to our seminary, our Presbyterian seminary here for their marriage and family counseling program, which I did not get into, and it worked out that I should not have been in that program at that time. It wouldn't have worked out. There was too much stuff going on with my kids and family. But we had to go in and sit down and audit sit through a class and take a tour and eat lunch and
Yeah.
have a conversation with the director of the program. And we happened to just randomly, because Tammy and I both had applied, sit in the same, we sat in the same class, but the class was all on death and dying and suicide. And I mean, like, I got so for a while there, I was reading a lot about death and the afterlife. And, the message over and over again was that there was nothing to fear. And then I read a book called The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. The author of that book was his sister, and she kept channeling him. And I don't know how much time we have, but she would channel him, and he led her like through these dreams to help her, take her friends to specific doctors to see for healing and it was wild stuff. Like I completely, believe that there really is no, like, I believe there really is no true death. It's just that we lose the physical body, and our consciousness is still there, and
Yes.
that that it is a place where there would be no fear. Um, I know that I've driven a lot of folks, and have um, I had a few who I found who were in their 90s, and two of the four that I became close with driving regularly were Jewish. And I got more of a sense of fear there because my understanding is that when you're dead, you're dead. Like there's nothing, it's over. Like that's it, like lights out. And so the two folks that I became close with who were Jewish definitely had more of a fear of death, or at least spoke of it actually, than those who had more of a Christian faith background and trust that, there's something better on the other side. Um, so, but I'm curious. I'm curious, what's your spiritual belief after death? Because I do think for some that can also be a part of like helping them be less fearful. I don't know if you believe that. Maybe your experience with ayahuasca helped you with that. But I also am curious, with having sat with your father, um, did you find that he, had one of these major life regrets, as two-thirds of people do, like in being able to walk with him through those last days? Was that like a mirror that, maybe others don't get to have, that allowed you to see this deeper purpose?
Yes. Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. Well, firstly, I'd say that my spiritual standpoint, what I believe in is from the experiences I've had, my near death experiences, I feel, I can concur with a lot of other people's descriptions of near-death experiences of of
Mhm.
leaving the body and feeling like it's not my time, and but in the process aware of the fact that I have left my body, and that I am aware that I am going into the light, and that there is clearly something beyond the physical realm. And I feel like I've seen that firsthand. Um, so, can I explain exactly what it is? No, I don't think so. I don't think anybody really can.
Mhm.
But all I felt was that it was utterly beautiful, and I could feel the love radiating in the space. Um, and I think there's more and more scientific correlation that's mounting now, that with near death experiences, and people's descriptions of them being so similar, that I think even the scientists are waking up to this now and realizing this has got to be taken pretty seriously. So I believe that there is an energy that, uh, you know, a bit like in Star Wars, that connects all
Mhm.
things. So
Yeah.
whether you want to call that God, or whatever, the universe, or I do believe in that. I do believe in that, and I believe that you can tap into that, and you can tap into all the consciousnesses that there have ever been, including my father. I believe I can sort of tap into and access him, um, and yeah, that experience with him has definitely helped shaped my confidence in the work that I'm doing today.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine. The other, um, and I don't know if this relates, but I did want to read this because it's something when we talk about purpose, I don't know if this one too. This is like one of my favorite books, The Way of the Superior Man. Have you read this one? Anyway, on
No, I haven't
it's
read it.
almost like a reader. So they're short little pages, but this one is when I think about men, okay, because it really is written for a man, but it is a great guide for both men and women. But on day 3, it says, live as if your father were dead. A man must love his father and yet be free of his father's expectations and criticisms in order to be a free man. Imagine that your father has died, or remember when he did die. Are there any feelings of relief associated with his death? Now that he is dead, is any part of you happy that you need not live up to his expectations or suffer his criticisms? How would you have lived your life differently if you had never tried to please your father? If you never tried to show your father that you were worthy? If you never felt burdened by your father's critical eye? For the next 3 days, do at least one activity a day that you have avoided or suppressed because of the influence of your father. In this way, practice being free of his subtle expectations, which may now reside within your own self judgment. Practice being free in this way, once each day for 3 days, even if you still feel fearful, limited, unworthy, or burdened by your father's expectations. And so I think about this, and then, what you've shared, and just how many people out there, this is a real thing for many, I think. Don't you? Living up to their father's expectations,
Yeah,
and
absolutely. And I think just listening to your words now, yeah.
um and I think it's harder when you're younger, right? You're in this
Sorry, I
space.
lost you there.
Oh no, I can hear you. Did what were you, did you say something that I missed?
Yeah, no, I was just saying, listening to those amazing words makes me reflect not only on how my relationship with me and my father, but also how I am right now as a father to my children. So thank you for those words. I feel like that's brought a little bit of clarity to my relationship with my children.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I think that, just even as a daughter, like there's this like um I mean, we're just conditioned in so many ways, right? To almost, and I'm not like almost avoid that purpose. And so I don't know. I don't know. I guess I digress, but um, I so so, but I did want to share that because I do think, again, it's that fear, as you said, but sometimes it's also, again, fear of all the people around us. What is everybody going to think? Which I guess is ultimately like what? Fear of the loss of ego and really like a death, and then having the courage to be like, okay, no, I'm not going to do it that way, despite what everyone else around me thinks. And even because, like you
Yeah,
said, it's almost
yeah,
a prison,
yeah. It takes a
a
lot of
trap we've created, right? It's our own prison. Um,
yeah,
there was,
yeah. It's crazy. Um, th- there's an amazing quote by an author called Joseph Campbell who wrote The Hero's Journey. I'm not sure if you're aware of him, but it's a really lovely quote, and it's the quote is, "In the cave that you fear is the treasure that you seek."
yeah, happens to be like when I was reading your Substack, I was like, I'm gonna take a picture of that because uh it definitely I wanted to bring it up. Yeah. I mean, that says it all, right? But you have to have courage.
Yeah,
So
exactly,
in
exactly.
your
Sorry, my
newsletters,
line has got really bad here.
I know. So in your newsletters, because I want to make sure people can find your work. Um, you talk about, and you have this AI sort of quiz, but you talk about how people can prepare for and find their purpose through awareness and mortality, right?
Exactly. That I think you summed it up very neatly there. So it's giving people the education to understand where their fears come from. And once people know where their fears come from, then you can actually do something about it. And the joy of bringing this conversation of mortality back into the open is that it's not morbid. It's something we all have to go through, whether we like it or not. And we may as well get on with talking about it, and the huge upsides and benefits of having the conversation, from mental and physical health, overcoming anxiety, sleeping through the night, clarity in your with your career, which then can lead to financial abundance and all sorts of repercussions from the simple act of acknowledging your mortality. And that's where it all starts.
I love that. So where can people find you? I believe it's dying to live, right? Or no? Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, it's the newsletter is called Dying to Live with Purpose, and it's on
Okay.
Substack, and the website address is livepurpose.co.
Okay.
Livepurpose.co.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure those links are in the show notes so that because I've really enjoyed our conversation and I'm with you. I think we definitely need to be talking about this. I know there for that same year, I had a friend who became a death doula here. I don't think she stuck with it. She's now working with adults with disabilities. Um, and right there is a whole uh topic in and of itself around like having to face the reality that, some of these individuals' parents they will die, and they have to be, unfortunately placed in various homes or different residential homes. And it's a conversation that many of those parents don't want to have because there's a lot of uncertainty with where their adult child with disabilities intellect will go. when they're no longer with. So, I mean, I think it's just, and so they were back then, this was like, I guess 2017. So it was all pre-COVID, but they were having regular death cafes here where people would get together and talk about a variety of things. And it was uh, really eye-opening for me. And I, again, appreciate it because it was
Yeah.
timely in connection with my friend taking her life. And I know she's present all the time. It's wild, really. So I
Yeah.
want to thank you. And I know it's almost nine. It's over.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
it's nine
thank you
o'clock
for
there,
sharing.
but it's 9 o'clock here. But it's morning here and night there. And I'm so appreciative of being able to share this time with you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's been a real honor.
Yeah, good luck with all your travels. When will they wrap up, or do you know what's next? Will you just keep traveling like this?
Yeah, we're in Thailand. We're about to go to Vietnam. Yeah, we're not sure yet. We're going to get back to Europe this summer, and we'll see from there where we'll put down some roots. But right now, we're not quite sure. We're just enjoying the flow.
Yeah, I just love it. I think it's just fantastic for you, for your wife, for your kids, for the community, and all the people that are getting to spend some time with you guys. I know there is a delay, but
Yeah, it's been amazing. Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much.